So welcome back to the NES Quest, and my quest is to collect the 100 greatest NES games of all time at or below price charting value. Today we've got a little bit of a different video because we're in between big events. I'm looking to try and do something I haven't done before, and that is go out to an area farther from where I live and hit a whole bunch of game stores all in one go. So today we're going to head out to Manchester, Connecticut, and then head south from there. There are, I don't know, 5-6 different places that you can go video game hunting in this area in Manchester, Connecticut, and I've never been to, I think, any of them. It's time to get to work. Let's get out there and continue the NES Quest. All right, so we're here at our first stop. We're here in the Buckland Hills Mall in Manchester, Connecticut. We're going to be going to Stateline Video Games, and I already walked by the front door, and I'm liking what I'm seeing. Definitely some retro stuff here, so let's go on in and check it out, see if we can add anything to the NES Quest.
So for our first location, Stateline Video Games, and they had a pretty impressive display of retro systems set up right in the front windows, and overall was a pretty cool shop to visit. They actually had a pretty good selection of NES games, including boxed NES games. There were a few of the rarer side games and a few from the list that I decided to pass on just based off of price. In addition, they also did have some rare games from some other systems. Prices overall did seem like they were either at or maybe slightly above price charting value for the majority of the items they offered. The other thing that they had was a decent selection of repro games, which I'm personally not a big fan of. I don't really like when retailers mix repro games in with original ones. I will say they did a good job of putting notices into their cases, delineating when they were repro games, but either way, just not a big fan of it. I was impressed overall by the variety of different systems that were covered, including these in-box Intellivision games. They also did have a decent selection of Sega CD, Dreamcast, and Sega Saturn, as well as modern systems like a pretty good selection of Switch. They also had a separate case that was just loaded with consoles, going back as far as the Atari, including a top loader at $175, which is a little above the price point I'd seen it in some other places. They had a nice little rack loaded with Nintendo Powers, and I decided to pick one up for Vice Project Doom, which I picked up in my previous video. First stop down, that is Stateline Video Games. It's a really cool store, definitely if you're looking for a little more specialized stuff. Their prices in there are maybe a touch high. They're pretty much at market value, so you're not really getting any deals. In fact, I don't think I did great when it came to the NES Quest stuff. So we'll go through those real quick. So Dodgeball, this one is a little dirty, but the label is actually really good, and the back is also pretty clean. So it'll take some cleaning up. Like, there's a lot of dirt right there, but overall it's in good condition. I think it just needs a wipe down and a cleaning, and it should be good to go. It's supposed to be one of the best sports games on the NES. I've never played it. I picked it up for $15. I think that price charting has it at $12 if I'm not mistaken, so that's going to be like a -3, but this one's in pretty good shape, and honestly I haven't seen it recently. Maybe I've just been unlucky. This is one that I wanted when I was a kid. This is Air Fortress. Never played it, but I always wanted to. This one is in very nice condition. There's a little bit of a lift there to the label. Otherwise, really good condition. I'm going to need to clean up the sticker there, but that's not a big deal at all. This one was at $10. This is a very inexpensive game. I think price charting has it at $8, but again, this is a really nice copy, and I wanted Air Fortress very badly, so that one is definitely off the list. The Adventures of Lolo, there's 3 of them on the NES. They're supposedly all very good. This one was a little cheaper for $12, but actually the label was nicer than the more expensive one at $15. So the physical cartridge is in better shape, but this is going to take some cleanup, but that's okay. I'm not against that. I think this is price charting for $10, so $12, I can live with that. And then the one I think is going to get me some value, I'm pretty sure, is the Battle of Olympus. Now, I'm not really going after inbox games, but at $60, the price charting value with the manual complete inbox, I think is $65. This is not a perfect box, but it's pretty darn good considering the age, and the manual is super nice. So I was not against spending $60 on this game. This is another John Riggs special. He is one of the kind of foremost people on the NES catalog, if you will. He's made a bunch of videos going through all of the best games from every publisher. But yeah, so he speaks very highly of the Battle of Olympus, and I'm interested to check it out and see if it qualifies for our final top 100. Next on the list is going to be a location called Retro Junk, which is very close, again, here in Manchester. There are several locations, so we're going to bop through them all today. So let's head over to Retro Junk now and see what they've got to add to the NES Quest.
The next shop was Retro Junk, and I've got to say, from the beginning when I saw this sign that's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles themed, to the large selection of retro items in the very front windows there, including this reproduction spot it looked like, I knew I was in for a pretty good time with this shop. Now in the front, I guess they had just recently picked up a very large collection that they were still sorting through, but they have a huge variety of items in there going back to old 80s and 90s retro, including different figures, a huge selection of magazines from Nintendo Power, Electronic Gaming Monthly, and others, and a nice little corner which actually looked like, I don't know, I guess maybe not a typical 90s room for gaming, but certainly reminiscent of what you might have seen back then. Now, their selection of NES was pretty extensive, as well as pretty much every other system as well. I would definitely say they had a larger selection of items than the previous shop, including some higher-end NES games in the case, such as Shatterhand, which I'd already picked up, but Dusty Diamond All-Star Baseball, on the other hand, I had not. They also had Inbox SNES, a good selection of Wii and other systems, and just an absolute ton of retro items like this giant Raphael. Now, I also noticed that he still had a stack that he hadn't taken in yet from NES and decided to plunder that, but they still had selections of retro systems as well as an entire room loaded with retro clothing. I mean, just look at this stuff. I was particularly drawn to the Ultimate Warrior jacket in the back end, although unfortunately it was certainly not my size, far too small. How's it going?
It's going. You have a YouTube channel or something?
Yeah, a tiny one.
Tiny one.
Yeah.
Start somewhere.
Yeah, I definitely want to check a few things out.
Yeah, you're welcome to slide that case open if there's anything in there you'd like to look at.
Oh, it's not locked?
It's from the sides, yeah.
I have to say that overall the pricing was certainly very competitive, and I did find a few items that were marked a little bit below price charting value. They had a pretty wide selection of both solo cartridges as well as boxed NES, and of course I went for the loose cartridges because I'm not looking to spend a metric ton of money trying to pick up this collection and complete the NES Quest. To find the best deals, obviously loose carts as opposed to paying for the cardboard and the manuals are certainly going to be the less expensive way to go. I did locate several games on the list, including All-Star Baseball, North and South, and Dusty Diamond. The owner, Brandon, was super nice, asked me about my YouTube channel, and was a pleasure to deal with. All right, so Brandon here, Retro Junk.
How you doing?
Hooked me up, telling me about all his crazy stories, getting lots full of sealed NES and SNES and everything you can imagine.
I wish it happened more often, but, you know.
He said once in a lifetime, hopefully more than that, but crazy shop down here, Retro Junk. And I'm also going to check out your buddy. Where's he at?
Cruz N Retro.
Cruz N Retro, just a little ways away. So, but he hooked me up, Dusty Diamond, a little discount on there, appreciate that. But
anytime, yeah, it was great to meet you.
Great to meet you too. I'll definitely be back. Appreciate it, Brandon. All right, so before we go to Cruz N Retro, there's another place that was mentioned in those videos I was looking at, and that is Grid Games, which is actually right here. So let's check out Grid Games. It might not be, no, it says video games. Let's see. Now, the next shop was the Grid Games, and I will say that I think the majority of the shop is actually dedicated more towards tabletop gaming and comics, although they still had a good selection of video games, but they weren't as much focused on the older stuff like NES. So there was only a pretty small selection of NES and cartridge games that were available, and there were far more GameCube and forward, certainly Xbox, PS3, PS4, etc., etc. Definitely a larger selection there. They did offer some additional third-party controllers, as well as a very large area for tabletop gaming, and a whole bunch of games to select from. They definitely had a good selection of comics, but it was certainly more limited when it came to the older game system games.
Certainly a very cool place to visit. I would definitely recommend it. Maybe not the best for NES, but certainly if you're into tabletop gaming, Magic the Gathering, those types of things, I would absolutely recommend the Grid Games.
All right, so we picked up some common stuff, but it was priced to sell, so I'm down for that. We'll do a quick recap of these two locations as we get back to the car. But hey, Grid Games, cool place, especially if you're into comics and tabletop games. But you do have some video games in there too, so all right, let's walk on back. Actually, I think he said something about games being in here, the Manchester Mall. So let's check this out too while we're at it.
Now, I did decide to stop into Manchester Mall, just hoping that there was some kind of a store that might have some older electronics and video games, and I was sadly mistaken. It is a pretty cool spot. I did stop by one of the locations to ask if they had any idea where I might find some video games in the place.
Old video games, anything like that? Not really.
And they promptly told me no, they didn't think there was anyone.
Man, look at this stuff. Holy.
Certainly a cool place to walk through and check out all of the antique and retro items, but not really for gamers.
That's crazy. Well, cool old place, but definitely not what I'm looking for, so we'll continue on.
Okay, so a quick recap in this blazing heat. First, from our first stop there, Retro Junk, we picked up baseball stars here, which he had marked at $14.99, but I did get a little bit of a discount on the top. Tiny Toon Adventures 2, which wasn't originally on the list, but again, $15.99, pretty decent price on that. All of his prices were pretty good, actually. Shout out to Brandon there. Definitely gave me some good deals. Rampage, which is another nostalgia pick, but with the sleeve, with the booklet. Definitely excited to pick that up. A couple of ones I wasn't expecting to find. One, Dusty Diamonds All-Star Baseball. Now, Brandon actually hooked me up on this because he has 85 bucks on it. We checked out price charting, has it around 65, and he let it go to me for 60 bucks. It's a pretty clean copy. We got some stickers to take off on the back there, but other than that, it's in really good shape, so excited for that. And the OG, haven't had it yet, had to have it. Castlevania, again, good deal on that one. And a much lesser game, but still one I needed to have in the collection. That's Muscle, one of those weirdo wrestling games that we played with. Another surprising one to see in there, North and South, when I've been seeing it at conventions, has been very expensive. $37.99 is almost exactly at price charting value, so I had to pick that one up. And then Godzilla, which he actually had 2 copies of. This is another nostalgia pickup, $24.99 on that. Like I said, he did give me a discount on the whole thing. I think he took off like 15 bucks, and then individually he gave me a deal on Dusty Diamond, which very happy to pick that up. Pretty rare, hadn't seen that yet. Then we went over to the Grid Games, and then basically they didn't have much for NES, but the NES they had was priced well, so everything I picked up I think was at or below price charting. So RC Pro-Am's been on my list for a while, and picking that up for $4.99 is definitely a good price there. Here's another one from my childhood nostalgia pick. That's the original Black Box Baseball. That one went for $2.99. And Legend of Kage, I thought I already had. Maybe I lost it or gave it away or something. It's $7.99 though. I think is a good price. I actually didn't check that one. But that one's in really good condition. And another nostalgia pickup, that's Soccer. I played this all the time with my uncle, and he claimed that he wasn't letting me win, but I was winning pretty consistently at a very young age. So Soccer added to the NES quest under the nostalgia picks. All right, so now we're on to our next destination, which is going to be B&T Trading, which is only a 6-minute ride from here. I think it's a pawn shop, but supposedly carries a bunch of video games. So we're gonna go check that out, and we'll be there in just a second. So we're here at B&T Consignments. Admittedly, consignment stores aren't like my main kind of place I like to go into, but let's take a look. You know, some of them can surprise you, so let's see if this one does. Next up was B&T Consignments, and I will say that consignment stores and pawn shops aren't my favorite, but I do go into them from time to time. They are certainly one of the places where you can get better deals value-wise, but typically you're going to be looking at a poorer selection, and you're going to be looking at items that need a fair bit of love to try and get them back into proper shape. I will say that the owners were very pleasant to deal with, and there was a decent selection of video games compared to some other places that I've been to.
All right, so not really the NES spot. They didn't have a whole lot in there, but I did pick up Jurassic Park for the Genesis, which I remember from my childhood being kind of fun. So that's kind of a weird pickup, but I just saw it there in the case, and 15 bucks, not a bad deal. He gave me 10% off. Did pick up a couple of other things. Final Fantasy Tactics, A2 Grimoire on the DS, just because I've been collecting a lot of Final Fantasy stuff, and so he gave me a little deal on that. So it actually has more video games than you would think looking from the outside, but not quite what we're looking for the NES Quest. So now we're on to our next stop, which promises to have more, and that is Cruz N Retro. That's a little ways away, so I'm gonna get to driving. All right, we have arrived at our destination, Cruz N Retro, so let's head inside. Now the next stop was Cruz N Retro, and this was a shop that was recommended by Brandon from Retro Junk. This is a smaller location. They actually are moving into a larger one. By the time this video is out, I think they've already moved into it, and I'm looking at going back and visiting them in their new location in an upcoming video. And even though the store was absolutely tiny, it was packed with games. Big selection of individual games. What they had done is take a lot of the common games and put them on one side, and then moved some of the more uncommon ones into a glass case on the sidewall. Between NES, old handheld games, PS4, Wii U, Xbox, you name it, they had a pretty good selection overall of each. And one of the things that I noticed is that the overall condition and quality of items in this shop was very, very good. There was pretty much nothing in poor condition that I saw across the entire selection of the store. Now, on the pricing side, I would say that they are priced at or maybe slightly above market value on the majority of games, but the quality of the products they had, combined with the overall selection, especially in such a small space, definitely a very nice shop to visit. I'm excited to see what it looks like once they've moved into the larger location, and I'm definitely going to pop back in to see what they have in the future for the NES Quest. Again, very nice in there, very small. They're moving to a new place in November, they said, so that's cool. They'll be able to open up a little bit, have a little area for some gaming, that type of stuff. But very cool, very nice. I would say price-wise, they're right about at price charting, slightly above maybe. But I did get one of the bangers I've been looking for. So I overpaid by about $5 over price charting, but not too bad. And considering it comes with the manual, if I count the manual, which I think isn't in the best shape, I think I'm ahead of price charting. We'll double check that. The good news about this one is I did stick to the list for once, as opposed to just adding random games from nostalgia or whatever. So this was a nostalgia pick, but it is on the list. That is Urban Champion. Oh, that reflection's gonna be rough, but we picked this up for $20. However, this one does have the manual included. So I believe price charting puts me in a good spot there, because the manual on this is, I guess, expensive. I don't know much about that. The banger is Battletoads, $46.99. It's a little over the loose cart price, I believe, but we do have the manual in there, and the cartridge is in good shape, and I haven't seen Battletoads really anywhere except like super overpriced somewhere. I can't remember where it was. So $46.99, I can deal with that. Cobra Command, another recommendation from John Riggs. So interested to check this one out. $10.99 I think was literally 99 cents above price charting, so can't go too wrong from that. But that's 3 additional games off of the NES Quest. Now we're gonna move on to our next location, which is either gonna be Retro Games Plus or it's going to be M&J Video Games. We'll see which one's closer, and then I'll let you know when we get there. All right, so turns out Retro Games Plus is closer. So here we are, Retro Games Plus in, I think this is Newington, the Newington location. I've been in here a few times. They seem to have a pretty decent selection. So let's check out Retro Games Plus. Probably my favorite chain in Connecticut. I mean, you don't have a lot to choose from, but Retro Games Plus is owned by Chris, the same guy who runs Retro World Expo, which we went to in the last video. So let's go check out Retro Games Plus and see what they've got for us today. See if they can knock anything off the NES Quest list. Next up is Retro Games Plus, and I have to say that they are my favorite chain in Connecticut by far.
Next would have to be Game Exchange, but there's really only three. It's those two, and then GameStop, which no one really enjoys going into GameStop all that often, let's be honest. But Retro Games Plus is definitely the best. Between their offering of free-to-play arcade games in the front, just setting the mood for everything, along with just an entirely huge selection of retro games, accessories, 90s paraphernalia, toys, game guides, manuals, you name it, they have it, and they have it in spades. Now, I will say that in this particular location, I didn't find a ton of higher end games that I needed for the NES Quest, but there were still some games that I was definitely interested in. Unfortunately, they also had Battletoads, which I had just picked up, and I think they had a little cheaper, but it didn't have the manual, so not too sad about that. Again, a nice glass case offering, including boxed games and games from higher price systems and imports. They did have a nice little collection of Famicom games, which I wasn't expecting to see. Unfortunately, nothing that was on the NES Quest list. And I did end up picking through some of the more common games to see if there was anything I was interested in adding. Top Gun Second Mission is actually regarded as a game that's a little better than the original, so for $5, I figured it wasn't a very heavy investment to give that a shot. I did take a quick peek at Sega Saturn as I've been interested in getting back into it, and I did notice they had some CRTs available as well, including a sign on the front door that said that they were purchasing CRTs. They always have a pretty cool selection of retro shirts and sweatshirts hanging around the store, although usually not in my size and certainly pretty expensive, and a Virtual Boy setup, which was pretty cool. You don't see that all that often. Modest pickups there at Retro Games Plus. We got some cheaper ones. We did pick up Top Gun, the Second Mission. Never tried this. Interested to check it out. $5. Pretty good shape overall. Then Snake's Revenge was on the list, $18.99. I think it's $2 or $3 above price charting, so that won't be a plus there, but it is from the list. And then Tiny Toon Adventures. I know we just bought Tiny Toon Adventures 2. I can't remember which one's supposed to be the better one, so $15.99 I think is $1 more than price charting. Okay, so we're here at M&J Video Games, so hopefully the owner, John, is here. He's a super nice guy. Either way, we're going to be looking at games for NES Quest here at M&J Video Games. The plus side of M&J Video Games is they have an absolute ton of games. The minus side is it's not the easiest shop to actually shop. They put the majority of their loose games for NES behind glass, and it can be a bit of a pain to try and see all of the games. They also have a large rack behind the counter that holds a whole bunch. It's one of my favorites for overall selection, although I would say it's not the easiest from an actual shopping experience. All right, so unfortunately they were kind of in a hurry. He was heading out to a wedding. But that's okay. We still did come up with one game I haven't seen at any other shop yet. That is Xerxes. This is another one that was recommended by John Riggs. And this one is in pretty good shape. It's got a little bit of cleanup to do, but does come with the manual. I think with manual, the whole thing comes out to like $22 on price charting. So $24.99, you know, we're $2 to $3 above, but it's in really good shape, so I can't really complain. And I haven't seen it anywhere else. I figured we'd take a shot. So we're going to hit one more stop on the way back. That's going to be Game Exchange. So I'll talk to you when we get to Game Exchange. All right, so we've made it to our final destination. This is a Game Exchange. It's a little bit out of the way for me because I go to most of them. And there's the sunlight in my eyes, but this one's a little out of the way. I think I've gone to it maybe like 6 months ago or a year, but should be pretty fresh in terms of product. I haven't really picked through it. Let's go see what this Game Exchange has in store, and hopefully it includes a few games for the NES Quest. For our final spot, we did stop at a Game Exchange, which I hadn't been to in quite some time. Now, Game Exchange is certainly a larger franchise than Retro Games Plus, still not quite at the GameStop level. But in terms of their overall offerings, I mean, GameStop doesn't really offer much retro. I know they brought back their retro game designated stores or what have you, but Game Exchange is really the only major chain in Connecticut that offers retro games other than Retro Games Plus. Now, I will say it is a bit of a mixed bag when you go into these as far as finding NES offerings. Some of them you'll have a pretty good selection, and others they'll have almost nothing. They typically have a better selection in terms of the more modern systems like PS4, PS3, Xbox 360, etc. But in this particular one, there actually was a good selection of NES games to choose from. and I did have some luck finding a few games from the list and just a few games I was interested in. The overall condition on some of these games can be not so great because you are getting lots of trade-ins, and it doesn't seem like they do a whole lot in game exchange to try and clean up the cartridges, so I was expecting to do some cleanup on my end, but typically when I'm looking for these cartridges, I'm just trying to make sure that the physical cartridge and label are in good shape, and then if there's some cleaning I have to do on my end, then I can live with it. Now, certain games like this Legendary Wings were certainly far too far gone for me to be interested in, but the majority of games seem to be within reason. I would still stray away from games that were a little yellowed or just had so much dirt and grime that they just didn't seem like they were worth it, and certainly if they had label issues, then I wasn't that interested.
All right, so I guess going to the game exchange that was further away worked out because they definitely had a few things I hadn't seen. So not a lot, but the prices were good. I can't complain. I haven't double checked it, but A Boy and His Blob is a game I've heard a good bit about. I hear the graphics are bad, but the gameplay is good. $9.99, super clean copy, just very clean. Can't complain about that. And then another game. This is supposed to be the better game to Akari Warriors. This is Gorilla. And this one just needs a little bit of cleanup, but the physical cartridge and the label are good. So I felt fine about that. $14.99. And then we went ahead and picked up Gyrus, this time finding it for only $9.99. And this one is very clean. No issues with the label, no issues with the back. Might be hard to see with the plastic, but sometimes it pays to wait.
And that just leaves one final thing to do, and that is to cross off and put away all of the games that we picked up in today's haul.
Alright, so we were able to knock big games off of our overall top 100 list, and in our next episode, we're going to head out to Syracuse, New York for Retro Gamescom, one of the biggest gaming conventions in the Northeast. So this will actually be a 3-day event, and we're going to drive out there and spend all 3 days hunting for the NES Quest. If you've liked what you've seen and you're in on the NES Quest, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And until next time, this is Pirates for Pirates Gaming saying thank you for watching, and I will see you there.